Welcome to Doors to Hope and Healing, an inside look at the many facets of work that is happening at the Department of Children and Families, between our staff, the families we serve, and our community partners. My name is Jacqueline Ford. I have had the honor of working for the department for almost 30 years. And although I may be familiar with many of the topics we bring to you, I have invited experts in those fields to help us dispel the myths and misconceptions that can often be barriers to our work. Join us as we open our doors and invite you to have a seat at our table. Dr. Glen, thank you so much for being a part of Doors to Hope and Healing today. It's an honor to have you on our show to talk about the new work that you're doing at the department. But before we get started, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. I'm in my 30th year in education. I started off my career in New Haven public school system. I started off as a school counselor. I went from a school counselor to assistant principal. And from assistant principal, the superintendent then, Dr. Mail, asked me to be a principal of a turnaround school. This school has been a failing school, historically been a failing school. And what happened was we were a turnaround school, so I got a chance to have everyone interview for their position. Not to say the people there were no good, but I think we just need a shot of fresh blood.
Fresh start.
And so we've done that. And believe it or not, after the first year, we started seeing gains in our scores. Mind you, 70% of the kids are Hispanic, the other African American, large bilingual population. And so we restructured school and got the school back on the right direction. Stayed there for 7 years, and we're looking for another challenge. So I became the director of adult education, and I did that for 2 years. And then the dream job came open, which was Principal of Hills High School. I was there for 6 years. I got a chance to do some reform there. We created some associate programs, so kids graduate from Hill House could graduate with an associate's degree from either Gateway or the University of New Haven.
Wow.
And then this position opened up here at DCF, which I thought would be a great challenge, right? I'm working with kids in our juvenile justice facilities. And so I've been with DCF for only a year. Just recently hired all my staff, part of my staff. So our work is working with students who are in our detention facilities and also incarcerated, who are of high school age. Our task, as we see it, is to ensure that the kids have quality education while they're there. As you know, our kids come with a wide range of gaps in their education. So we feel it's our role to ensure that we fill some of those gaps while we have them contained with us. And also, our role is when they transition back into their school. The third thing is also work on post-secondary education. For me, that's kind of crucial for our kids to be successful, ensuring that they're on some kind of path, whether it's going back to school, going to college, or some kind of career path or some kind of vocational path.
When we talk about our kids, so these are kids that are involved with the Department of Children and Families because of family issues?
So no, so these kids are, not only that, these kids who have committed some kind of crime in the community.
Okay.
They don't have to be DCF involved.
Okay.
So I have all those type of kids who are in our facilities.
Okay, so some may be some DCF involved and some may not be DCF involved. And the gaps in the time that they're away from school, you know, the learning curve there is huge, I'm sure.
Yeah, and so as we go to our facilities, we notice that, you know, kids with these learning gaps who are struggling, which is, and I shouldn't say good, but in this case, the classroom size at our facilities are small, so they can get some individual attention. And so we have a lot of work to do on that part, but the framework is there to make our kids successful.
And they're mandated to go to the classroom setting when they're in the detention centers.
So, which is good. So, yeah. So, as you probably know, some of our kids probably don't go to school when they're out, right? And so to have them in these facilities, we should take advantage of the time that we have them.
Absolutely, because they can't be stepping out of class when they're in there and following the rules when they're there. So talk to us about, you came on board at DCF about a year ago, you're forming your team, and you have an entry plan, when you come in to get a good sense of what needs to be done. How did you pull all that information together? This is a huge role to fill, and you said it's a big challenge, but how were you able to really get to work? How did you form, knowledge and gather knowledge about all of the different facets of this one role that you have?
So let me start off. The first thing I did was there were a lot of meetings around juvenile justice facilities in Connecticut, right? The Juvenile Justice Policy Oversight Committee, which makes up representation from DOC, CSSD, DCF, Department of Education, child advocates, our legislators, they all got together and they've been meeting about our facilities. So I read all those notes going back to 2018.
Now, is this how the Public Act of 21-174 was formed?
Correct.
Okay.
Right. And so I met with child advocates. I met representation from DCF. I met with folks from SDE, DOC, I'm trying to think, and people who were on their JPOC committee, just to get a sense from them how they, the direction that they want this unit to go into, and what do they see some of the issues are. And so after I took all those notes together, I created my entry plan. We decided, I talked about it earlier, these are the buckets we're going to work on. We're going to work on the quality of instruction. We're going to work on transition. We're going to work on post-secondary education. We felt those are the three things that everyone feels there's an issue around, but we know if we work on these things, our kids are going to be successful. And so we've been meeting with all the school leaders monthly about best practices. We'll talk like that. We'll talk about best practices. We're now starting to do what's called learning walks when we go visiting schools with the school leaders and talk about what we see and what they think we need to improve on. With our partner with SDE, we were able to do targeted professional development for each facility, because each facility is going to be totally different. Their needs are going to be totally different because of the type of the school leaders that's there and the type of teachers who are there, right? So each facility needs different type of professional development. And so we've been, our last school walk was at Manson Youth, who I think has done a tremendous job of changing how they approach our kids. And I think of all the facilities, they probably got the most news, let's put it that way, around what they do and what they don't do, right? But I think they came a long way since that report that was said about DOC. And so we have learned a lot from the folks that we work with. I mean, being in New Haven, working in the public school system and working with this population, there's some similarities, but there's some differences. So some things that we had to learn quickly about the things that we couldn't really do. But we still feel that no matter where our kids are, the quality of education has to be the same. That approach got to be the same.
That consistency.
It's got to be, right.
So you gathered that kind of historical perspective of all that has been done before you came on. So after gathering that information and doing these walks and starting to build your team, what is your vision for your new role at the department?
Yeah, so I'm going to tell you that it's kind of difficult, right? Being from DCF and to oversee two different agencies, right? So there's a fine line that we're walking. But my vision really is to ensure that the quality of education is no different than the kids who are in public school system, right? one of the things I talked about is because our kids have so many gaps that we need to put some intervention in place where we support those gaps versus just teaching for the sake of teaching. We need to find out what those gaps are and try to slowly fill those in. So that's my vision of how the quality of instruction should look like. Also, my vision is also around partnerships, right? I'm a strong believer. Now, I stole this from I stole this from Florida. Florida has their kids kind of almost duly enrolled in the community colleges. So the community colleges play a huge role in the juvenile justice facilities in Florida. It just makes sense, right? If we don't put our kids on a path of either going to college or some kind of vocational training, they're just going to go back to the community and know what they know, right? You know, I'm hungry, so I got to steal a car because I need money, right? And so we don't start putting our kids in our path for those middle class jobs. They're just going to go back and know what they do best.
Are you beginning to partner more so with the community colleges that we have in Connecticut?
So I have some conversation with Gateway Community College, who's on board. We just got to figure out a funding source and how that makes it work. So they're on board with it. So in New Haven, there's a program called, it's called the Gateway to College program. And it's for kids who are over age or undercredited. So kids who have at least 10 credits or supposed to be seniors go to Gateway, they're duly enrolled. So they're getting their college credits and their high school diploma at the same time.
And are they taking those classes at the high school?
At Gateway Community College. And we're having a lot of success with those type of kids. Now, those kids I had at Hill House, there's some great kids and there's some kids who need a lot of love, right? The kids who need a lot of love who went to Gateway to College program has done very well. And so I'm like convinced that this is a great way for our kids who are in our facilities to move forward. And I look at it like this: if our kids were not successful in the schools they are at, right, and now they have to go back to that, the likelihood of them going back to school is not great, right? But if we put them in another situation, another environment with some adults who's going to school and will wraparound services, they're going to be successful.
So what strategies do you have in place to, I know you're just getting started, but have you implemented any strategies to ensure that you're on the path to this vision that you have?
So right now I've hired 7 transitional counselors. So their role is to work with kids as soon as they walk into the facilities until they're being released. And 3 months after that, to ensure that they're in school, that everything that's put in place is in place. I have this vision of before kids are released from our facilities, that our transitional counselors are working with the schools, right? And they're creating a plan, and they figure out who's supposed to be at the table when this kid walks back in the building, and have this re-entry meeting that we're going to call. And the reason I think I'm so high on this, I remember being a principal at Hills High School and kids come back to us and not knowing that they've been locked up or been away for such a long period of time. There's some information if I had, I think I would have made these kids been a little more successful. And so we want to make sure before kids go back in there, everything's set up for them to be successful.
And that the principals know what this journey has been like for them.
Yeah.
And when you talk about, them going back in that transition plan that you have with your transition workers, and that 3 months after that they stay involved, is that a part of their terms of their probation that they have to be attending and successful in school? It's not. It's.
And I laugh when you say it. So I think, not to throw people under the bus, I think what we say to kids is that you have to attend school. Doesn't mean they have to go to class, but they have to attend school. And so there's times when kids come back to me and all they said, I have to be in school. I don't have to go to class, I don't have to do work. And so we want to make sure before before kids go back,
There's a plan.
There's a plan. We want them to go to class. We want them to be successful. Whatever we put in place in the facilities, it carries over. So,
and that's a safe feeling for a student to have, especially returning back to, they want to do well and they want to be successful. They just need the tools and resources to make sure that happens.
Yeah.
And that's, that's you and your staff there. So what's your goal for your plans for professional development of your staff?
So my staff and we have done some professional development together as a group, understanding the type of students that we're going to be working with, and what we expect when they leave us. As far as the school goes, their professional development is centered around what we see in our walkthroughs. Like I said, everyone's different. One school, the teachers may talk too much and kids don't get a chance to practice the skills that they're supposed to learn. To shorten the teacher's talk and give the students more time to practice the skills that they're supposed to be learning. The other professional development, I wouldn't call it professional development, but a workshop that we need to do is with the reentry coordinators at each school. So each school district with more than 4,000 kids have to have this reentry coordinator. We're going to have a PD or workshop with those folks, talk about what that reentry looks like, and who should be at the table. So that's another thing that we need to work with the public schools. We already sent emails out to those already, reaching out to introduce ourselves and looking for, and knowing that, let them know that we're going to have a workshop around kids being released and what it looks like.
Because like you said at the beginning of this conversation, that collaboration and that teamwork, this is really, when you talk about that old proverb, it takes a village, but it really does take, all of the school and all the different, organizations that are involved with a child who could help them to be successful. If you're all on the same page and you have a plan, it's a well-oiled machine, basically.
Right.
When you first came into DCF, or even now, is there anything that really surprised you with this role or the work that you had ahead of you? I know it probably took a lot of thought and for you to make the decision to come on board. But is there something that surprised you?
I wouldn't say anything that surprised me. I think working for DCF, what I've learned is that there's a lot of folks who are out to support kids, right? And I think there's some overlap that we all can work together to support the kids in our facilities. And I just feel that, the people there are, and you wouldn't think this, but they're really people. They love to support one another, and they, which I kind of like being a part of a team like that. It's an agency like that. The fact that DCF does so much is surprising. I think we talked about this earlier. I think what people think of DCF is not the reality, and I wish people can come and really take a walk around even in central office just to meet folks and see what folks do. It's amazing.
Yeah, there's a lot of good work that's happening. And, that's one of the missions of our show, like we talked about at the beginning when we were preparing to start, is there are so many facets of the department and so many selfless, tireless workers that are doing so much to impact change. And it's important for our viewers and for all members of the community to know, because you did say that you feel that success is everyone's responsibility. What does success look like to you when it comes to, our youth or your team, the professional? Like, what is success? At the end of the day, how would you say you would measure success?
I think, I always measure my success around kids, right? It's kind of hard to measure my success around adults, in my mind, just me.
Yeah.
I think if we can transition our kids to the right path, whether, like I said, vocational or college or even just in the workforce, I think we did the right thing, right? As long as our kids are not coming back, Yeah.
Have you had any conversations with the youth since you've been involved to see if the work that we're doing is impacting them? Is it changing the narrative for some of our youth?
No, I know I'm being scheduled to do that. I have not. Informally, I talked to kids as I did some, visits, but not to the point where, how can I be more helpful to you? What do you see? How can I be more supportive to you guys? We have not done that.
Like a listening tour type
We have
of
not.
thing.
Kids have been. I'll take that ownership that we have not done that.
But you have time. You have plenty
Yeah, I
of
do
time
have.
to
Yeah,
do that.
I do.
Is there a youth that you think of in your career, in New Haven, at Hill House or somewhere that, one particular youth that just stays in your mind, their story, the trajectory of their life is something that pushes you forward or makes you want to be better in your role?
I try not to get. I think of this one young man, and whenever I tell a story about tough kids who had it tough, so I'm gonna call him Harvey.
Okay, tell us about Harvey.
Harvey, I remember him as a freshman, and he didn't do well, just never went to class. Harvey, I think, failed every mark every year. He's a repeating freshman, third-year freshman. Always got in trouble, always got suspended. A lot of conversations with Mom. Mom was frustrated. She was frustrated with me, obviously frustrated with him. He would do something, he had to be removed from school. And I remember one time he got suspended. And Mom came in, read me the riot act. After she was finished, and this is when that Gateway to College program came on. He was, this is a tough kid, but if you met him now, you would not know that. And so I asked him, I said, what do you want to do with yourself? I said, we can't continue to do this, you and I. He did say he wanted to go to college. And I said, is that right? And I said, you know what? They just had a brand new program. And this is when Gateway to College just came off. And I said, if you go this whole year in this summer school, I bet I can get you in that program. I bet you'll graduate on time. Service suspension, him and Mom came back and we talked again about it. We went over to Gateway, walked around, met with the folks at Gateway. He said, I think I can do this. Went to school, Hill House, and got the necessary credits. I worked with him. I talked to him every time I chance I got. How you doing? I make sure everybody in the building who saw him, make sure if you see him in class, you make sure to acknowledge this. He gets his 12 credits that he needed, goes to Gateway. I think he did a year and a half. And so that's why I feel that schools like the community colleges, they're small enough that we can provide that culture, that environment for those kids to be successful. So so every time I think about anybody asks me about anything about why what's my motivation, Harvey's in my head.
Yeah.
Harvey's in my head, because he could easily, continue to do what he normally did. And,
I hope that there's a moment in time where you're able to tell Harvey, how he's inspired you to do greater work and how important it is. And I think it's important for our viewers to hear too, that when a youth is getting all this negative attention and this negative energy, if they have people who are looking out for them and they have people in the school who invest in them being successful, it's possible. And I think Harvey is an example of that. Yeah. That if you take that time, and like you said, I think one of the most powerful things you were just saying is that you told your staff that if you see him, you acknowledge him. Right. And and it doesn't have to be that negative acknowledgement. Acknowledge him that he's here. And just the fact that he graduated from Hill House is huge. That is a significant from a kid who repeated freshman year several times, and you shared that frustration with his mom. And I think that embrace that she gave you was probably the biggest thank you that she could have given you. Well, I appreciate you being on our show.
Me too. Thank you.
I'd love to have you come back after you've done
Please,
more
that'd
work
be great.
and show where we're going and how far we've come. But it's a pleasure to have you on.
Thank you. I appreciate your time.
Thank you for watching Doors to Hope and Healing. Please stay tuned for a video that was recorded from our youth, from the Youth Advisory Board, teaching us to meet them where they're at. Thank you for watching.
I have a story that needs to be told.
Before I was placed in foster care, I learned through actions and inactions of others
that I was not worthy of love,
that I was not worthy of love,
that I was not worthy of love or attention.
I learned that my needs
are not a priority.
As a result of that negativity,
I experienced insecurity.
I want to be accepted by society, but I'm unsure if I have that ability.
Teach me through your actions.
Teach me through your actions.
Teach me through your actions that I deserve to be cared about
and treated well.
Don't make me feel as if I'm a burden.
Remind me that I am here for a reason.
That I was brought into this life because I'm strong enough to live it.
I'm strong enough to live it.
I am strong enough to live it.
Show me that my presence is a gift.
Try
to meet me where I am at.
The Saybrook Fish House in Canton has been serving fresh seafood, chicken, and steak entrees for 34 years, offering 3 cozy dining room settings, a newly renovated pub with craft beer, wine by the glass, specialty cocktails, and a lighter fare menu. Open for lunch and dinner 7 days a week. Reservations accepted for parties of 2 to 42, and gift certificates are also available. The Saybrook Fish House, nestled at the crossroads of Route 44, 202, and 179 in Canton.